Yes, you read the title correctly. We got more Bermuda support that might or might not be Prism support. And yes, Persona Blast is back in 2022. Who would have thought?
Stand up! Vanguard!
Hey Cardfighters, welcome back to another Cardfight update, and today was once again the Tuesday livestream reveals, which gave us new Bermuda cards, which was of course the new duos, but on top of that we also see a brand new boss unit for Gold Paladin, which is very surprising, but honestly very interesting to theorize about, and some generic new card for Spike Brothers that might or might not actually have some impact in the clan, but we're gonna take a better look at that in a second here. So, with that all said, let's jump straight into these cards, and we're going to start off with the big guns today, which is of course the brand new Bermuda Triangle cards. So let's take a look at these new duos and see why they can potentially support Prism. So first off, we got a brand new grade 1, which is Duo Pretty Horn Ural. And Ural has the effect, although when a unit is placed in the Vanguard circle, search your deck for up to one normal unit, bind it, and shuffle your deck. So this is just straight up binding cards. Now this can immediately show you how this could interact with prisms, because it allows you to immediately put one of the prism cards in your bind zone that you're either missing from your hand, or you want to have more consistent access to as fast as possible. So a nice right target. But also has another effect, which is although when the unit is placed on the regular circle from hand, choose up to one normal unit from your drop and put them on the bottom of your deck. If the card put on the bottom of your deck has the same card name as the card in your bind zone, cast Soul Blast 1 and draw a card. So this is yet another way to fill your deck as well as drawing card. Now of course if you draw a card you don't really fill your deck, but at the same time you're adding more cards in your hand without losing the deck count, which is nice. Now the only thing that I have issue with this card is that the way that this allows you to plus is very specific, because you need to put a card from your drop zone back into your deck, which is the exact same card that's also in your bind zone. So that requires a lot of setup. Yes, there are ways to get more consistent access to this, and the longer the game progresses, the more likely this is to go off. But especially in the early game where those draws are more instrumental, more important, this is a lot harder to get off. So this skill is a bit iffy for me. Will be better if the game goes through the long haul, but the question is how long will games nowadays progress with the power level that we're seeing. Next up we've got the grade 2, and then we can see actually what this duo mechanic and this archetype or engine is trying to do. So for the grade 2 we have Duo Mini Hard Roan, and Roan has the effect, although in regular circle, when this unit attacks, for each card in your bind zone, this unit gets power plus 3k until the end of battle. So it's a beater. And we see the grade 1 allows you to put cards in your bind zone, and we're probably going to see more cards allow us to put cards in bind zone, but we also have the Prisms archetypes that allow us to put cards in the bind zone. So this can be a quite sizable beater, and therefore can also be utilized in Prisms. But the main application of this card also comes from her secondary effect, which is act on Vanguard circle, regular circle once a turn. If your Vanguard with Duo in its card name, so this skill doesn't interact with Prisms at all, cost counter plus 1, choose a card from your bind zone, search your deck for up to one card with the same card name, reveal it, and put it in your hand and shuffle your deck. Now, this together with the grade 1 allows you in the early game to tutor for any card, because you can write the grade 1, put any card from your deck into the bind zone, then write the grade 2 and use your effect to grab another copy from your deck into your hand. So you fill your deck for 2 cards and you get the card to your hand. So this can search for PGs, search for vital key pieces like rear guards or whatnot, or if you don't have a grade 3 in your hand, but you have the grade 1 and the grade 2, you can secure the grade 3 100% of the time, which is a great engine that can be splashed in any deck, even Prism, because yes, you need to have a Duo Vanguard, but if you can write the grade 1 and the grade 2, you will fulfill for the condition and you can tutor out for any card by turn 2, which honestly is very strong. But in a duo deck, she has a rear guard, allows you to set up more cards and more interactions. But then again, besides the grade 1, your targets are very limited. Because yes, this can be insane for the early game searching or tutoring for a specific card, but once you have that card, let's say it's the grade 3, the only thing you can search after that is the grade 3 until you bind more other cards, because you can only tutor for cards that are in your bind zone. So depending on the bind engine you have access to, this could be very strong or not. And yes, prisms can bind stuff, but the amount of cards that prism bind is very limited, and they can only bind prisms in most instances. So that's a bit awkward. But that's only the case if we're not looking at the grade 4 Duo Prism card, which is of course Nectaria, which allows you to get any card into the bind zone. So if you bind her from hand, you can tutor any card from your deck into the bind zone, which allows you to get more targets for this grade 2. So the grade 4 is very pivotal to make this grade 2 a very strong card. So either you write the grade 1 on turn 1 and then go into the grade 2, or while you write this thing on turn 2, you use the grade 4 in your hand to get something in the bind zone that you want to tutor to hand, or anything when you go into your grade 3 turns. So it's a very powerful tool, but it needs more pieces to make the card very strong. Now, moving on to the grade 3, this is where things are going to get a bit interesting. We have Duo Temptation Raid, and Raid has the effect, act on Vanguard Circle once a turn, cost, bind a rearguard, and draw a card. So this is essentially just a cycle effect that then also sets up your grade 2 to search out for more targets. So this is an interesting card, it's synergized with that aspect, but it also will play into her other effects, which is also going to be very important. Because her other effect is auto on Vanguard Circle once a turn. At the end of the battle, this unit attack costs counter +1 and discard a card. Stand this unit. So resetting Vanguard, and this unit gets drive -1 until the end of turn. So that in itself is already really decent, because it basically means you cycle cards, discard 1, but you will have a drive check for the cost of counter plus, while also having another Vanguard attack, which is very powerful. But then the second part of this skill is choose up to 1 card in your bind zone with the same card name as the card discarded for this cost and call to the rearguard circle. If your opponent's Vanguard is grade 3 or greater, get an imaginary gift force and put it onto the Vanguard circle. So not only will you have a resetting Vanguard that doesn't minus you on hand, which is very strong, but you can also potentially get an extra rearguard attack and potentially get another force marker on your Vanguard, thus making your second Vanguard swing hit even harder. So this can potentially be very powerful in the right circumstances. But for any very observant among us, that superior call of the rearguard circle skill is very situational, because this only will happen if you happen to bind a card that also is in your hand. Otherwise, this extra superior call will not activate. So it's a very specific situation which you can easily whiff. But that's where the grade 2 and the grade 3's first effect and the grade 4 Nectaria come into play. Because these 3 skills allows you to set up a scenario where this skill will activate. Either you have something in the bind zone that's very good to superior call, so you use the grade 2 to tutor a copy of that particular card and add it to your hand so you can discard it. That is very counterblast heavy, because that means it's 2 counterblast, so you cannot sustain that for multiple turns, especially if you use the grade 2 in the early game and you don't have access to decent counter chargers. You can also use Nectaria if you have something in your hand that's pretty decent and you want to superior call that, so you can use Nectaria from your hand to bind another copy of that card from the deck straight into the bind zone. Or you can use the grade 3 if you have that unit onto the field already, or you have 2 copies in your hand to then call it, bind it immediately, and then use the second copy in your hand to discard to get the superior call effect. So there are definitely situations where you can get this multi-attack off of the skill, but it won't be like a 100% situation. There's definitely going to be situations where you only will have reset your Vanguard, maybe get the force marker, but you don't get the superior call effect. Now, of course, you see all these bind effects and extra searches and more consistency options, and you can immediately think to yourself, holy crap, this is going to break Prisms even more. And Prism is already the #1 deck, or one of the strongest deck in the format in V Premium. Let me tell you, that is probably not going to be the case. Yes, the grade 1 and the grade 2 are very nice and are pretty generic in the sense that it can tutor out for any card. The issue is that if you do not specifically write the grade 1 and the grade 2 in Prisms, they don't really do anything. Yes, the grade 2 can be a beater, but there are other beaters within Bermuda Triangle which are probably better, or at the very least aren't very restrictive around your bind zone. Because if you brick a little bit, you could not bind all too much, then she doesn't really do anything. And at the same time, Prisms, depending on what build you're playing, doesn't really bind a lot. Like, they specifically bind just enough to make their plays happen, because they keep calling cards from the bind zone and that don't really replenish themselves in the bind zone. So your bind count doesn't accelerate like through the roof very fast. So it won't be as strong as a beater that you might imagine. Now, also a thing to keep in mind, that grade 1 has a draw effect, which puts card back into your deck, which sounds very nice, and you think that's going to be broken. There are 2 things that make the card not really that ideal for Prisms in terms of her secondary effect, which is that it costs a soul, which conflicts a bit with the soulless skill to get the triple drive on your grade 3 Vanguard for Prism, and the fact that it puts card from your drop back into the deck that needs specifically be a copy in the bind zone, which means you're gonna put Prism's cards from your drop zone back into the deck, which actually you do not want to do, because the Prism archetype, although it sounds like an insane engine that will go off all the time, is actually a very delicate balance of getting the right cards in your bind zone and in your drop zone, so you can keep binding the Prism cards back into your bind zone when you recall the grade 1s and whatnot. If you start putting multiple copies of those cards back into your deck to draw more cards, that can significantly decrease the value of your engine, because suddenly you might lose the piece that you needed to bind to keep your engine going for the next turn. So yes, on paper these cards look very promising and very powerful. In practice, I am not as confident as some players might think that this can immediately break the Prism's archetype itself. Funny enough, I think the Duo deck, Raid herself, is much more dependent on the Prism deck than the Prism deck is gonna be dependent on the Duo archetype. And that's just by the sheer fact that these cards really require you to have a significant amount of cards in your bind zone to really do something. And yes, the Duo engine does that quite decently. They allow you to put more cards in your bind zone, thus increasing the consistency of having cards to discard, maybe draw more cards or whatnot to get your engine going. Whereas the other way around doesn't necessarily translate as well, as they are more specific situations where you need to either write a card or get certain things in rotation. So I'm a bit skeptical of how these cards might upgrade Prisms. They could definitely break the deck out of nowhere, because maybe we're overlooking the specific situation, and maybe suddenly with these cards Nectaria actually becomes really good and we see a different build of Prisms rise out of nowhere. But I don't think it's all doom and gloom that some players might think, with the fact that we've seen more more Bermuda cards that use the bind zone. Because yes, they use the bind zone, but they also require you to have a specific Vanguard in a specific situation. Now, besides that, for Bermuda Triangle, we also know the reprints, which are these cards. And yes, it's very nice to see that Nectaria is going to be reprinted, as we already explained multiple times so far, that the card is pretty good for the Duo archetype that you're going to need. So having more easy access to this card is very nice in the same set where Duos are being released. But of course, these Bermuda Triangle cards weren't the only cards we saw so far, because we also have 2 new cards for Spike Brothers and Gold Paladin. So let's quickly go over these cards to not make this video go longer than necessary. So first off, for the one for Spike Brothers, we see a brand new grade 1, which is Reckless Express. And Reckless Express has the effect, although if the unit is on the Vanguard circle, this cost may be paid with Soulless 1. When the unit is placed on the Vanguard circle or Rearguard circle, costs Counterblast 1. Look at the 7 cards from the top of your deck, choose up to 1 normal unit from among them, call to the Rearguard circle, and as rest, and shuffle your deck. So this is essentially just a tutor card, which allows you to set up your board state. Maybe certain cards with unplaced effect can activate to chain into those into potentially the early game, which is nice. But that depends on the resources, because if you go first, you soul blast 1, which means you have 0 soul. You probably also don't have any counterblast. So any unplaced effect that uses a resource, you cannot use it. So this is essentially just to have a plus. And I am not too familiar with Spike Brothers to know what type of value you can generate by calling something in rest. Yes, you can call a grade 3, so next turn by grade 2, you have a grade 3 on the board. But if you're up against a control deck that can retire something, yeah, that doesn't really do as much, or they can just attack into it if it's not too high of a base power. So it depends on the scenario and how much resources you have access to. I can see this doing something, but I don't know how much value this is going to be. Now, it also has a secondary effect, which plays into its first effect, which is on a Rearguard circle. At the beginning of your main phase, put this unit into your soul, search your deck for up to 1 Reckless Express, call to the Rearguard circle, and shuffle your deck. So now you generate soul, and then you're going to call more cards from top 7. Yes, that will call a counterblast, but because you just generate soul, now you can activate other skills that might use soul for certain resources. So there might be some synergy here that allows you to also get more consistent access to particular cards, because it just checks top 7 for any unit. So it's a nice way to tutor out for cards that you really need on the board. So we might see this card get some usage, but I don't know how Spike Brother players are going to abuse this card, especially since the fact you call it in rest. So yes, even if it's potentially during the main phase, you don't really get something out. I can understand why. So you cannot really use it as a multi-tech engine, but yeah, I don't know how much this card is going to do. And on top of Reckless Express, we also saw 2 confirmed reprints for Spike Brothers, which is Adorbs Perm Rona and Power Back Ronaldo. These are 2 cards that can interact with Reckless Express depending on how much resource you have. Interesting enough, you can use it with Ronaldo to repopulate the board, so it could be actually a multi-tech engine that's generic, that isn't bound like something like Dudley's or anything. So maybe it could be something, but I don't know how that will interact, and we have to wait and see till we see the other cards for Spike Brothers to see if there's a new build on the horizon. Now, something that's actually on the horizon is potentially a new build for Gold Paladin, which is kind of spicy. Some players would say underwhelming, but I love this type of jank stuff because it gets my cranium going, as we've got Conviction Dragon, Chrome Jailer Dragon. And Chrome Jailer Dragon has the effect, act on Vanguard Circle, once per turn cost, counter +1, and discard a Conviction Dragon, Chrome Jailer Dragon from your hand. Yes, that's a persona cost, a persona blast. Look at the same number of cards from the top of your deck as the number of open rearguard circle. Choose any number of unit cards from among them, call them to the rearguard circle, and shuffle your deck. That's a mouthful, but essentially you can repopulate the entire board. It's a main phase 0 setup Aggravain, which to me already sounds very fun because I love Aggravain, but this could honestly be a lot of value because for 1 discard, 1 counterblast, if you write this on your very first turn and you have no board, that's potentially a +6. Yes, you might be forced to call triggers, which you don't want to do, but you don't have to if you have a good board. And the reason why I say you probably want to call triggers is because of its second effect, which is on a rearguard circle. When this unit attacks, if all of your rearguard circles has a rearguard cost, counter +1, and soul +1, until the end of the battle, this unit gets power +10k, critical +1, and if your damage zone has 4 or more cards, it gets drive +1. So triple drive. 22k Vanguard swing with double critical, which is a decent pressure behind it, and it also populates the board. Now, I'm not saying there's going to be an insane deck that is like the next tier 1. Absolutely not. But the fun thing is that this card interacts with a lot of things with the Gold Paladin. There are many things with on-place effects that allow you to get more resource, like things that immediately pops to the soul, that you can call more cards. You have cards that activate if you call a certain amount of cards in a single turn, that like when you call 2 do something, when you call 4 do something. This then basically fulfill those conditions. This is a nice way to search faster to the one-off Percival, which gives you another circle with Agloville. That means if you clear the board, then next turn if you rewrite into another Chrome Jailer or Chrome Jailer Dragon, or you just keep this one, because keep in mind you need to discard a copy of himself, you can have even more calls off it. And this can also synergize with cards that put things to the soul to bounce them back, like Agloville, for example, or Spin Wheel Knight, which means you not only populate your hand again with more cards, but also you clear the board for next turn to call even more cards with Chrome Jailer Dragon to have even more of an advantage engine. So there are a lot of interactions this card allows you to do with multiple strategies within Gold Paladin. So I'm curious if there's actually a decent strategy with this card. It looks very interesting on paper, but the Persona Blast cost is kind of annoying. But maybe there's a way to not make this as your main boss unit, but something you build towards. Like you play something else, maybe like an Ezel deck or just Aggravain in general or whatever, and then once you can farm up your Chrome Jailer Dragon copies, you write into another card and then you can discard one. And because you just wrote up later, that means you have multiple circles, so that means the skill will get even more value because you can check a buttload of cards from your deck, which also means your filter for triggers even better. So yeah, an interesting card that might be a tech option for any deck, like a late game strategy. If your opponent blew up your entire board, you write into this thing, you draw into another copy of your Excel 2 marker, and then you immediately repopulate the board and destroy your opponent with triple crit because you filter your deck. You know, these are the things I live for, and these are the things I enjoy about these type of decks. So yeah, there's no way I would not be excited about this. But yeah, let's be honest, it's probably not going to be as good. But that said, that's about everything that we have today. Let me know in the comments down below what you guys think of these new cards. Do you think I am undervaluating the duo interaction with Prism? Do you think it's actually gonna break the deck? Or do you agree with my sentiment about the stance that they are good cards that probably will not really support Prisms all too much. And also, is there something about Reckless Express that I don't understand about the value of this card? Like maybe there's something with the battle phase that can call something that can repopulate the board, like with Ronaldo or something. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. And are you on the same copium as me, saying that Conviction Dragon, Chrome Jailer Dragon is the next big thing for Gold Paladin? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. As always, this video has been brought to you by my lovely patrons over patreon.com/VanguardInsider. You guys are amazing. If you want to support the channel or everything that's happening on the channel, you can simply go to patreon.com/VanguardInsider and become a patron today. But with that said, I've been Mr. Time Leap, and I see you guys in the next one!